Dare great things for Christ. Christ calls us to dare great things. In the marketplace, as well as in the mission field, there has never been a time like the present for the spirit of the Catholic entrepreneur. Now is the time for men and women of great courage and great vision to engage our church and our culture. Now is the time to dare great things. And here is your host as we dare great things, Father Nathan Cromley, the president and founder of the St. John Institute.
Without a doubt, something that all leaders have in common is that we are men and women of action. Practically oriented, skilled in social settings, leaders tend to rise to the top because they engage their talents in their situations to make a difference. They are men and women of action. Does the Christian faith have room for them? And do they have room in their hearts for Christianity? What about contemplation, receptivity, submission to God? In this second part of our series on applying the gospel, we explore these actions and more. Hey everybody, as you know, you're with the St. John Leadership Network, and we are dedicated to bringing faith to leadership and leadership to faith. I want to welcome you to the second of our classes here on applying the gospel, leaders of action. What I'm looking at specifically is a document that the Vatican put out way back in 2011, all about the vocation of the Catholic business leader. And it's a fabulous document. At the end of it, there's a whole section where it starts talking about how to apply all of the concepts that the document puts out. I'm focusing in on this class and these different parts of the class on that particular aspect of the document. So today we're going to be looking at paragraphs 64 through paragraph 75. Now, in this part of the document in particular, the church focuses on a question that many of you have and are asking yourselves, which is, what are we supposed to do with our businesses? What are we supposed to do with the enterprises that we lead, the organizations that we lead? And of course, remember that there's three ways to look at Catholic leadership. The first and most basic level of Catholic leadership is to say, I'm leading this organization for Christ. Okay, which means Jesus has asked me to do a service. The service is to organize this particular enterprise, this particular group of people, and to do it well. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, it's a wonderful aspect of Catholic leadership. We render a service to our brothers and sisters by leading. And some of us are very gifted at leading, and so it's a wonderful thing when someone who's actually organized can get the job done. I'm thinking of that old saying that people told me as a priest. It said, if you need to get something done, ask a person who's too busy to do it, because they'll get it done. And it's been true all these years. If you really want to get something done, you ask the person who's already doing a ton of things, because they actually get the job done. Where if you ask someone who's got plenty of time, it seems like the thing never gets onto their priority list. Well, being a person of action is a gift, and we thank you for it, okay? So you do that for Christ. Like, I do this, Jesus, as a gift to you. I use my talents to serve you, okay? The second way to be a Catholic leader, second level of leadership, is to lead people to Christ, which means you use your position of authority or your position of power and status, whatever it might be in society, even if it's a small little group of people that you have a leadership position over, you use that in order to introduce values at the very minimum, right? But a way of life, a vision that opens people up to God. It opens them up to Jesus. Explicitly. Now, there's different degrees that you can do this, and it's what we're called to do. First, you enter a community, or first you enter a group of people in the service of them as a leader. But then, to the degree that you can, and at the appropriate time and in the appropriate ways, well, you don't hesitate to bear witness to the fact of what you believe is the truth that's guiding your great leadership. Right? If we just keep silent on the gospel, especially when people ask, or we have the occasion to bear witness by the way of our living, or even by our words, well, then we do. Just the other day I was with an optometrist who owns his own practice and bought his own building, And in his own practice and in his own building, he and his wife decided that they're going to erect a cross on the door. So when the people come into this optometry place, they see a cross and a beautiful painting, a big old 5-foot by 7-foot painting that's kind of abstract, but it is of Christ, and it has the word light next to it. It's a beautiful display right there in their office space. Well, I asked him, how long have you had this? And what's the reaction been? And he said in the entire time he's had this up, he's had one person complain. One. That's all. And you can't help but think how many people worried about finances, worried about their eyesight, found consolation and solace in knowing that they were in the hands of somebody and in the hands of a business that was vowing to treat them with the love that God has for them. I think of many more, in fact. Now, that's a real explicit example, right? You don't have to do it like that, but it's the example of leading others to Christ. He decided that that's what he wanted to do with his freedom and with his practice. And so he did it, and I think he's a blessing to everyone who comes into contact with him. The third level of leadership, though, is even more profound, and that's a leadership in Christ. This is the leadership of the saints. And it doesn't neglect the other two or ignore the other two, but it goes a step further. When we lead others in Christ, we are an instrument of Jesus that he uses in a mysterious way to bring his influence, his grace into the world in a way that's beyond anything that we can control. It's not the fruit of our own efforts. It's the work of God directly through us. The leader here is a real instrument of Jesus. And this is what the saints have brought to the world and what the church is calling the saints of God, the Christians, to give to the world. So all of this is just wonderful if you think about it. We have these 3 ways of leading. You can ask yourself what's appropriate in your circumstances. All of them are good, and all of them, though, have something in common. In all 3 levels, the church is saying that leaders are called by God to lead, to act, to be the men and women of action that they are. And I find this is something that's really not always understood. It's interesting, especially being a priest who works with business people, works with leadership, because we priests are really trained in seminary to be men of prayer and men of study. I mean, we're formed in these environments where the intellectual life and the life of reflection of the soul and of prayer is put at the foremost. And that's because the church really wants you to have deep roots. Like St. Paul, who after his conversion spent 3 years in the deserts of Arabia. That's what he says in the letter to the Galatians, that he went off and he spent time alone with God. Well, that's what priests do in seminary. And our seminary training is anywhere between 5 years and 9 years long of prayer and study, academics, rigor, time spent with other, future priests and with priesthood close to the bishop. I mean, it's a marvelous time in the life of a priest. But if we're not careful, something can happen. We can end up not understanding the Catholic layperson whose life is full of nothing but practicalities and a never-ending list of to-dos. And there are many lay people, especially those who find themselves usually at the top of a business or of some sort of organization, who have an uncommon need for activity. I mean, if you're a medical doctor or you're a mechanic or you're a handyman of some sort, whatever it might be, you're constantly working with your hands. You think with your hands. You feel the world with your hands. Well, that's because, you're practically oriented. Is there a place in holiness for people like that? Can folks who are focused in on action, who need to act, who are built to be people of activity, find a home and a spirituality within Christianity? The answer, of course, is yes. But the question is how? How do we couple the very strong and orientation that some people have towards the active life with the demands of a spirituality which really favors and is heavy upon contemplation? Well, exactly in that balance and in that place, we find the vocation of a Catholic business leader. Catholic organizational leaders are at the vanguard of the church's understanding of the holiness of the lay person. And she gives us in this document anyway, kind of a marching order, so to speak, or a description of what we can do. I want to plunge into that and see the principles by which the church is guiding for those who are really involved in action to become saints as men and women of action.
Are you a Catholic business owner or executive with your company? We have an invitation for you. August 11th through 15th, St. John Institute is hosting an Audeo Leadership Masterclass retreat in Evergreen, Colorado. At this one-of-a-kind leadership training, you'll learn how to bring the power of your faith to guide you on your challenges as a leader, deepen your spirituality, and meet other Catholic business leaders as interested in their faith as you are. With newfound wisdom, you'll craft the plans necessary to lead a daring life. Visit stjohninstitute.org/SJI-events to claim your spot. We'll see you in the Rockies.
In 1975, Pope Paul VI wrote a document all about how the gospel is spread in the modern world. And he's describing, our situation. He said, how are we going to evangelize the world today? And he said, for the modern audience, the world will listen more to witnesses than to teachers. That's a really powerful statement. The world will listen more to witnesses than to teachers. Meaning it's not the abstract concept of intellectual thought that's going to win the day in the argument in the world today. Instead, it's going to be the way that we put that thought into practice and what we actually do with the noble ideals that we espouse. Well, that's an incredible statement. And this is echoed further on in the document here from the Vatican, where it says, today more than ever, the Church is aware that her social message will gain credibility more immediately from the witness of actions than as a result of its internal logic and consistency. Okay, so that's a quote from John Paul II. And what the Vatican is saying here is that, look, we need men and women of action today because the world is looking to see what we do more than what we say. And of course, that's not just the world. It's the same with our children. It's the same with our spouses. When we try to lead our families, it's all about how we actually live and what we do. And that gives us an advantage. It means that the practicality that we love to espouse as leaders and men and women of action is the key to our own success. If, in fact, you who are lay people want to bear witness to Jesus Christ in the world, well, then the choice is yours. All you have to do is put it into action. Now, that, of course, is a difficult thing, right? Because where your action is, you got to put your money where your mouth is. Well, exactly. You can't just talk the talk anymore. Now you get to walk the walk. And well, that's exactly what you do. And isn't it amazing to see the Catholic Church really emphasizing that leadership itself can be an act of holiness? Because, as she says here in this document, it's an act of charity. In paragraph 69, we read that Pope Benedict wrote this. He wrote, quote, charity is the principal driving force behind the authentic development of every person and of all humanity. In other words, what's driving us to make our businesses great? What's driving us to make our businesses authentically instruments of Christ? Love. And not just any love, but charity, which specifically is God's love in us. Now just think about how powerful that vision is. Because that means that then all the activities that we do, if they come from the heart that is given to God and that is the source of God's love for the world, well then all those actions express God's love. Which means when people come into contact with that action, even if it's not explicit and they don't see it, they still are coming into direct contact with the love of God for them. It's really something to contemplate, the beauty of the witness of the church our church founds hospitals, our church founds schools, our church founds outreach to the poor, to the AIDS community. Our church has dental clinics, missionary dentists going all over the place to take care of people in far off lands. What's behind all of that? It's not just that we love a God who is spirit, but that we love a God who so loves the world that he asks us to love the world with him. And so we do. And feeding the poor and taking care of the sick is just part and parcel of what we're called to do as Christians. Well, what is that? I mean, if you could organize that activity, you'd call it a business. I mean, if you organize the activity of, going off and taking care of children's dentistry needs in third world countries, and you made it sustainable by its own activities, and you had management of the people who were responsible, you'd have a business. I mean, it's a business model. It's not a for-profit company. It's a non-profit company, though. And it takes leadership that says, our goal in life is to make the gospel resound through actions, and that our actions need to be able to speak louder than our words. And now if we could couple words of the actions, that's even better. But at the same time, hey, we're here to deploy our talents and our skills at the service of love. And that makes love real. And when we make love real, we make our faith real. And the world will listen to us more by our actions than by our words. Well, what does this mean? This means that you should embrace who you are. I mean, if you're called to be a contemplative sister, or if you're called to be a monk, well, go ahead and do that. I mean, we need more contemplative sisters and we need more monks, okay? We need people who are there dedicated to God in prayer, absolutely. It's just that that's not what most of you are called to do. Well, then you say, well, what am I supposed to do? Well, here in this document anyway, the Vatican lays out some principles. It says in paragraph 70 that the very first thing that you're supposed to do is to practice the action of receiving. Now, that's kind of surprising, right? Because you're like, how does my action one of receiving? Isn't activity and passivity, aren't those two contradictory words? And the answer is no. In order for me to produce something, right? To make something out of nothing, to drive forward and to create new possibilities out of things, I need to be centered and focused. In other words, I have to recognize that not everything depends upon me. And the Vatican puts this out in paragraph 70. There's a beautiful sentence here. It says, without receptivity in their lives, business leaders can be tempted by a sort of Superman complex. The temptation for some is to regard themselves as determining and creating their own principles, not as receiving them. Business leaders may only see themselves as creative, innovative, active, and constructive, but if they neglect the dimension of receiving, they distort their place within the world and overvalue their own achievements and work. And we've all seen this happen. We think about our friends who are addicted to work, or we think about our friends in the family who are just overwhelmed by the constant need to do the next thing. You know, I remember that joke that I heard one mother tell another mother, and it was really funny. She said, honey, do you want to know someone who will always be there for you, and no matter what? And the other mom said, well, sure, what's that? And she said, laundry. Laundry will always be there for you. that was cute, right? But that can also kind of like lead us to a never-ending cycle where we're like a hamster spinning the wheel. And that's not the way we're supposed to live. We don't create the world by our activity. Instead, we receive a world that comes to us from God, and then we deploy our energies to cooperate with God in this great design of tending the garden, so to speak, right, that he gave us, and of leaving it a better place, and of bringing God's redemptive grace into it. We start our doing by receiving. And by so doing, when we do that, we overcome the temptation to live a divided life, where we don't really see the point of our faith because we are too involved in the world. Instead, you understand that having a deep faith is exactly what's going to propel you into the world. I will be a better person in activity the more that I have a deep sense of contemplation. I will be more active, more engaged, more innovative the more that I'm spiritual. And this is paragraph 72 says this in a beautiful way. The church calls the Christian business leader to receive the sacraments, to embrace and to be inspired by the scriptures, to honor the Sabbath, to pray, to contemplate creation, to participate in silence and the other disciplines of the spiritual life. These are not optional actions for a Christian, not mere private acts separated and discontinued from business. Isn't that amazing? I mean, what a statement. That they just said that the spiritual life, contemplation, prayer is not separated from business. Well, how could that be? It's because the more that you receive, the more that you know where you are to engage, what you are to do. We then work not just disconnected from God, we work with God. And that's the point and the beautiful opportunity we have when we bring our faith into our business.
Would you like to start your Thursday mornings with a scriptural leadership lesson? Join the St. John Leadership Network, where Father Nathan hosts a 30-minute call at 6:30 a.m. in all 4 U.S. time zones. To learn more, go to www.stjohnleadershipnetwork.org/member and join for free today.
So we've been talking all about the vocation of the business leader and how this vocation for action and change is rooted in spirituality. That really gives us an advantage, especially those of us who are Christians and deeply in our Christian faith, because it means that our prayer life is not an option. Our prayer life is at the essence of the action that we're called to do. And there's a place where this is lived out in a particular way, and it's the Sabbath, of course, which is Sunday. And our Sunday obligation for Catholics to go to Mass is an expression of this, but this keeping and honoring the Sabbath is supposed to be bigger than just going to Mass on Sunday. And I guess I'd like to challenge you here a little bit. How are you doing in your observance of the Sabbath? Well, what I mean by that is that there's a commandment that the Bible gives us to rest physically, to rest in celebration, yes, and also, to rest in God, in prayer. Pope Benedict says this: the biblical teaching on work finds its coronation in the commandment to rest. You see, it's almost like, well, how does work find its coronation in rest? How does my vocation to be a leader in business find its summit, right, and its highest point in my need to rest? Aren't the two contradictory? That's just it. No. And in fact, when I rest, I contemplate God's working. And when I contemplate God's working, I see my place and my role in that work more clearly. And then I can give in action and in leadership from a position of rest. I can cooperate with God. See, my action, in other words, is not called to be separate from the action of God. My action is supposed to be a continuation of the action of God. So my spirituality actually focuses me and allows me to align what I'm doing to be even more effective, more productive, and more an expression of the beauty of God than what I could do if I didn't have that profound receptivity. I'm a leader in action because I'm a leader in prayer. And here, this uncovers a real perspective that I want to share with you about how to look at our action. Because most of the time, we look at our action as something that we have to do until we can stop and enjoy our life. And so we divorce our work and our productivity from our real life, which is what we like to do personally. We like to watch TV. We like to play cornhole. We like to play lawn darts. I don't know. There's all kinds of things that we do to recreate. And we tend to find ourselves authentically there. And we find our work to be bereft of our deep, authentic identity, because then the work can drain us. So then we recharge on the weekends so as to deploy ourselves during the week and empty ourselves at the workplace. Well, this is not really the Christian vision of action. And if you are living that type of lifestyle, I'd like to encourage you to take some steps to change that. Because when a Christian is depleting themselves by what they do, well, we're not therefore bearing witness to the glory of God through our action. Action should not deplete. Action should recharge. Why? Because if we're doing our action properly in the right spiritual context, our action is a gift of ourselves, meaning I am giving who I am through what I do. Right? And when I can align what I do with who I am and speak my name through what my productive activity, well, then I've allowed the love that is at the center of my heart, a love for God, a love for others, a love for myself. I've allowed that love to become expressive. And now I've brought the world something much more than a new whatchamacallit or whatever it was that I was supposed to change or effectuate during the day. I gave myself. You see, true human action is an action that never is separated from the heart that is its origin. I am the one who's doing this. I can sign my name to my work. I've put myself in what I've done. And therefore my work is rewarding to me, number one. But number two, I'm going to make sure that my work is of the highest quality because it's something that I've done as a gift to you. And I've allowed myself, if I have that perspective, and I really attack my action from that position of true Christian charity, of love, well, then everything that I do is connected with you. I'm not separated from society by my work. I'm actually serving it. I'm making the world a better place, and I'm doing it for you. And then, of course, my connection with God is also real. I'd love to think that when we cross the pearly gates, that God will look at us and look at what we've done with our lives and not separate who we are from what we've done. I mean, isn't it amazing that Jesus himself, for example, was known as the carpenter's son? And St. Paul was proud to say that he was the maker of tents, a tent maker. I mean, so if St. Joseph himself in the Bible is going to be referred to by his work, it's because that was the gift that St. Joseph gave the world, that of being a carpenter. Just like it was the gift that St. Paul gave the world, that of being a tent maker. It wasn't the only gift that they gave the world, and yet they were truly alive and active in and through their trade. Well, can you be truly alive and active in and through your business? Absolutely. But it's when you have to put your identity into that business. And that's where Christianity summons us. It summons us to not be robots or able to be replaced by robots. As much as we can use robots, of course, we are more than that. Everything that we are, and the deep fabric of our moral life, of our identity, of our heritage, and therefore of our spirituality, is summoned by Christ to be given to the world through work. You see, he makes us his gift to the world. It's not just the food that we make or the care that we provide or the houses that we build that are God's gift. Those are wonderful things and we need them. But even more, it's the people who do them and the love that we give through them. Now, I get it. This is not necessarily the world's view of work. Well, I'm not here to give you the world's view of work. I'm a Catholic priest. I'm here to give you Christ's vision for work. And Christ's vision for work is that you become a saint in and through what you do. And that saint is a person of love, whose love is made real as the work that they do. See, we do apply the gospel by action, but it's not just by any kind of action. We apply the gospel by acting out of love. And that love requires us to be authentically ourselves and then to give what we do with pride, with dedication, with skill, as a gift to the people whom we serve. What a rewarding vision for work. And what a possibility this opens up, because then in the heart of our secular society and our economic realities and our social contract are Christians, salt in the earth, yeast and leaven in the dough, light in the darkness, stars in the sky. We are part of this world by our work, and yet we transform the world by our work because we lead by our actions.
Dare great things for Christ.
Share your feedback with Father Nathan. Send us an email at communications@stjohninstitute.org. That's communications@stjohninstitute.org. And visit www.stjohninstitute.org and sign up for our newsletter to receive updates from Father Nathan.